Interesting.
using one of Dr. Jordan Peterson's lectures as a guide.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's pretty fascinating stuff, really.
I can imagine.
You ever wonder, like, why some people just seem to sail through tough times
Mm-hmm.
and others just,
Yeah.
really get hung up.
Right.
Well, Peterson argues it's this really fascinating interplay of, like, nature and nurture
It is.
that we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that he doesn't just come down on one side or the other.
Right.
It's not just, oh, it's genes or it's all your childhood.
Yeah.
It's really this nuanced kind of interplay between those things, which is fascinating.
Yeah. So let's start with nature then, the genetic hand we're dealt.
Okay. Sounds good.
Peterson talks about these 5 dimensions of temperament.
Okay.
And they basically shape our personalities.
Think of them as like the scaffolding of who you are. So we've got extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness.
Okay, so 5.
5 big ones.
Got it.
And each one of these is a spectrum.
Uh-huh.
And where you fall on that spectrum is largely determined by your genes.
So it's kind of like a personality lottery?
It is, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Each of these traits has advantages and disadvantages.
Okay.
So
it's not like...
Take extroversion, for example.
Okay.
Maybe you're the life of the party. You love social interaction.
Yeah, it's great.
That's fantastic in a lot of situations.
Right.
But it also might mean that you're a little more prone to impulsivity. Maybe you take risks without thinking things through.
So even being an extrovert, which, sounds pretty good,
Right.
still has its downsides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And that's true for every single one of these traits.
Okay.
So, for example, someone who's high in neuroticism, they might experience more anxiety than other people. But on the flip side, they're also really attuned to danger.
Right.
Their brains are just wired to spot threats. Back in the day, evolutionarily, that was huge for survival.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So it's really not about saying one is good or bad, right? It's just about how they influence us.
Yeah.
That's really, I'm already starting to see myself a little differently.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to think about. Where do you think you fall on these different dimensions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to think about that.
We should all be asking ourselves that. It's
Yeah.
like holding a mirror up to your own personality. But remember, it's not a life sentence.
Okay.
That brings us to nurture.
Right.
How our environment shapes these inborn traits.
So that's where we actually have some power then
Exactly.
over our mental health.
Yeah, and to really illustrate this,
Right.
Peterson uses this really compelling story about this study with babies
Okay.
and a robot.
All right.
So you have all these babies in a room.
Yeah.
This robot rolls in.
Okay.
Some of the babies, they're super curious.
Uh-huh.
They crawl right up to this strange machine. They want to check it out.
Yeah.
Other babies,
Yeah.
much more hesitant, clinging to their mothers,
Oh, wow.
showing those really early signs of neuroticism.
So you can really already see these personalities.
Exactly. You
characterized.
can see it right there.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah, but here's what's really important.
Okay.
What happens next?
Okay.
The researchers found that if they gently encouraged those more cautious babies to explore
Okay.
at their own pace, of course,
Right.
that could actually shift them
Oh, wow.
towards a healthier relationship with fear and anxiety.
So you're saying that, like...
It's like nudging them
Yeah.
towards a less extreme
Okay.
point on that neuroticism spectrum.
So we're not just stuck with whatever we're born with.
No, we're not.
That's kind of liberating,
It is, yeah.
when you think about it.
It is, and that's a central point that Peterson makes.
Okay.
We have agency.
Right.
We can shape how these traits play out in our lives.
I like that.
Yeah, and that's where habits come into play,
Okay.
which...
So this is where nurture really comes in.
This is nurture in action.
Okay.
And Peterson sums this up brilliantly with a really great phrase. You become what you practice.
So if we practice, like, avoidance,
Yeah.
we become more avoidant.
Exactly.
But if we practice courage...
there you go. You get better at it.
Okay, so it's really about...
We're all works in progress, right?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
That's a good way to think about it.
We're constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is actually where psychotherapy comes in.
Okay.
Because therapists, a lot of what they do is they help people confront
Yeah.
these ingrained patterns of fear and avoidance,
Mhm.
right? They've learned to cope with the world in a certain way,
Right.
and it's not working for them anymore. So they help them practice new, healthier ways of being.
So it's like rewiring.
It is. It is. It's
Yeah.
essentially rewiring their responses over time.
So I guess what we're saying is it's about,
It takes time, though.
right, it's about understanding your temperament.
Yeah.
And then kind of consciously choosing
Right.
how you work with it, right?
Right.
It's not about becoming someone else entirely,
Right.
but maybe becoming a better or more resilient
Yeah.
version of yourself.
I think that's a fantastic way to put it, yeah.
Really? Okay, good.
And Peterson doesn't just talk about these big, abstract things.
Okay.
He
Which can sometimes be a little hard to,
it can be hard to apply it.
Yeah.
Right. So he actually gives very concrete advice for creating positive change.
I'm thinking about his emphasis on like cleaning and organizing your physical space to reduce anxiety.
Right.
Um,
It's fun.
he gives that hilarious example of the teenager's room.
Yeah, the classic.
Just this explosion of...
Clothes, books, who knows what all else.
Yeah, just stuff everywhere.
It's a perfect illustration of chaos.
Right, right.
But what's interesting is
Yeah.
that he connects that external mess
Okay.
to our internal state.
Interesting.
He's arguing that creating order in our surroundings can actually have a calming effect
Oh, wow.
on our minds.
Okay.
And he even uses this metaphor of, he calls it the original Eden.
Okay. Break that down for me.
Okay,
But-
so what does he mean by that? It's this idea that our ancestors, way back in like hunter-gatherer times,
Okay.
they were most at ease when their environment was predictable,
Right.
understandable.
Okay.
So there's a sense of peace that comes from knowing where things are,
Mhm.
from having a sense of control over your immediate surroundings.
So if we take that chaotic teenager's room and we start putting things back in their place, creating order,
Right.
it's like we're recreating that.
You're recreating that little microcosm of Eden,
Wow.
this little space where your mind can relax,
Right.
feel safe.
So think about it.
When
Yeah.
your surroundings are all cluttered,
Yeah.
chaotic,
It makes you feel more stressed.
and absolutely overwhelmed.
Totally.
Okay.
I know when my desk is a disaster zone, my anxiety just goes...
Yeah, exactly.
Surface-y.
So the idea is
Yeah.
by simply tidying up your physical space, you can actually start to calm the chaos in your mind.
That's powerful. It's simple,
Simple but powerful.
but powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it's something we can all put into practice.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
What's one small area in your life that you could organize today
Right.
to experience this calming effect?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tidy up your desk?
Yeah.
Could you organize a drawer?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this huge project.
Right.
Just a small step
Yeah.
towards creating more order.
I'm already thinking about that junk drawer that's been haunting me.
I know, we all have one.
Yeah.
But Peterson doesn't stop at decluttering our physical space.
Right.
He takes this idea of creating order even further.
Okay.
He suggests that once we've established some order in our own personal space, we can start to expand that outward.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of creating harmony in our relationships,
Okay.
which is like the next step in
Yeah.
building what he calls our circle of order.
So it's like these individual circles of order, as they grow, can actually start to positively influence the wider community.
That's the ripple effect Peterson talks about.
So it's like these individual circles of order, as they grow, can actually start to positively influence the wider community.
It's a beautiful idea. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It starts with us taking responsibility for our own well-being,
Mm-hmm.
and then it ripples outward,
Yeah.
impacting our relationships, our
Mhm.
communities,
Okay.
and maybe even the world.
I love that. It's so empowering and hopeful.
Yeah.
But I got to admit, Peterson's emphasis on personal responsibility can be a bit challenging at times.
Yeah, I can see that.
It makes me
Mhm.
think about,
For sure.
those times when life throws us curveballs
Yeah,
that feel completely out of our control.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really important point, and it's crucial to acknowledge that
Yeah.
not everyone has the same resources or support systems.
Right.
Peterson doesn't downplay the reality of mental illness either.
Yeah.
He gets how debilitating it can be.
Right. So how does his framework apply when we're dealing with things like,
Mm-hmm.
serious mental health conditions or major life upheavals?
Yeah.
Or even just plain bad luck?
Well, Peterson's a big believer in seeking professional help when it's needed.
Okay.
He wouldn't suggest that willpower alone can cure clinical depression
Right.
or an anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
But he does suggest that even within those limitations,
Mm-hmm.
we can choose how we respond.
Okay.
It's about finding those slivers of agency.
So it's not about like denying the difficulty. It's about finding ways to navigate it
Right.
with as much intention and self-awareness as possible.
Exactly. It's about saying, okay, this is really tough,
Yeah.
but what small steps can I take today to move forward?
Okay.
And this is where that phrase, you become what you practice, comes back in.
So even if we're struggling with something beyond our control,
Right.
we can still practice healthier ways of coping,
Yeah.
of responding.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It might be practicing mindfulness to manage anxiety
Mhm.
or reaching out for support when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Right.
It's about those little micro choices that we make each day
Yeah.
that can add up to a big difference over time.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like in practice?
Sure. Remember that story Peterson tells about the client who was so overwhelmed with job searching
Yeah.
that they couldn't even open the file that had their resume in it?
Oh, yeah. They were paralyzed by anxiety.
Totally paralyzed.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It felt so relatable.
We've all been there,
Yeah.
facing a task that feels completely daunting.
Right.
Well, he uses that example
Yeah.
to illustrate how we can break down those overwhelming tasks into smaller steps.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on the entire resume,
Right.
this client just started by opening the file.
Wow.
That was their victory for the day.
So instead of getting stuck in that feeling of, I can't do this,
Yeah,
you find one tiny step that you can take.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's about building momentum,
Uh-huh.
proving to yourself that you're capable of moving forward,
Yeah.
even if it's just an inch at a time.
Right.
And as you practice taking those small steps,
Yeah.
you start to build confidence and resilience.
So it's like working a muscle.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
You get stronger over time.
This resonates with me so much.
Yeah.
But it's easy to get discouraged too, right?
Oh, for sure.
What about those times when we fall back into old patterns?
Mm-hmm.
Those moments when it feels like we're taking 2 steps back for every 1 step forward.
Yeah. Well, that's where self-compassion comes in.
Okay.
We're not striving for perfection here.
Right.
We're striving for progress.
We all stumble, we all fall down.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to notice those stumbles without judging yourself.
Right.
Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start again.
Yeah.
Peterson often talks about how life is inherently chaotic and challenging.
Right.
It's not about avoiding those challenges altogether.
Okay.
It's about learning to navigate them with more skill
Mm-hmm.
and awareness.
So if we circle back to that initial question we asked
Yeah.
about why some people seem to cope better with stress than others,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's not just about luck or genetics. It's about intentionally practicing,
Right.
building those coping skills.
It's about acknowledging the cards you've been dealt
Mm-hmm.
and then learning to play the hand well.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good analogy.
And recognizing that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Nobody has all the answers.
Right.
We all make mistakes.
It feels less about judging ourselves and others
That's
and
it.
more about embracing the messy,
Yeah.
imperfect reality of being human.
But I do have a question
Oh,
about,
great.
those really big challenges.
Yeah.
The ones that truly shake us to our core.
Yeah.
Loss, grief, trauma.
Okay.
How does Peterson's framework apply in those situations?
That's where his emphasis on meaning making comes in.
Okay.
He argues that even in the darkest of times,
Mm-hmm.
we can find meaning by choosing how we respond.
Okay.
It's not about pretending the pain isn't there.
Right.
It's about searching for those little glimmers of light,
Yeah.
those opportunities for growth and learning, even amidst suffering.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
Sure.
I mean, it's hard to imagine finding meaning when you're in the depths of grief.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
But imagine someone who loses a loved one to a sudden illness.
Okay.
They might choose to honor their loved one's memory by becoming an advocate for research into that illness.
Right.
Or they might find solace in connecting with others who
Yeah.
have experienced similar losses.
So it's not about finding a silver lining or forcing positivity.
Yeah.
It's about finding a way to move forward with purpose
It is
and intention,
intention.
even when the path ahead feels so uncertain.
Exactly. And it often involves connecting with something bigger than ourselves,
Okay.
whether that's a cause,
Right.
a community,
Yeah.
a spiritual belief system.
Okay.
It's about finding a source of strength
Yeah.
and meaning
Mm-hmm.
outside of our own individual suffering.
It's interesting. This is where his ideas move beyond the realm of
Yeah.
like individual self-help, right?
Yeah.
and start to touch on something much deeper,
Absolutely.
something almost spiritual.
That's what makes his work so compelling.
Yeah.
He's not just offering tips and tricks for managing your time
Right.
or decluttering your desk.
Right.
He's offering a framework for understanding what it means to be human,
Yeah.
to grapple with those big questions of life and death,
Right.
of meaning and purpose.
And he reminds us that we don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whether it's through therapy, support groups,
Yeah.
or just simply connecting with loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
There are resources out there
There are.
to help us navigate these challenges of being human.
We're social creatures,
Yeah.
we thrive on connection.
Right.
We're not meant to face these big existential questions in isolation.
So those circles of order we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
they're not just about creating order in our own lives.
Yeah.
They're about reaching out,
Yes,
building connections with others
Yeah.
who can offer support and understanding.
absolutely. And that brings us back to that ripple effect,
Just like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
If we're each working on creating more order in our own lives,
Yeah,
it naturally creates a more supportive environment for everyone around us.
absolutely. And that's where this gets really powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just about individual well-being.
Mm.
It's about how we collectively create a world that's more compassionate,
Right.
more resilient, and more equipped to deal with the inevitable challenges
Right.
that life throws our way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We've
From those 5 dimensions of temperament to the power of habits, the importance of self-compassion,
Yep,
to the search for meaning in the face of suffering.
it's a lot.
Yeah, but before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one of Peterson's most thought-provoking questions.
Oh, hit me.
Okay, so Peterson often asks his audience this: what is one small step you can take today
Okay.
to bring more order to your world and, in turn, to your mind?
I love that question.
Right.
It reminds us that we don't have to make these drastic changes to start moving in a more positive direction.
Right. It's a small...
Little incremental steps
Yeah, exactly.
that make a difference.
It could be something as simple as tidying up that corner of your desk that's been driving you crazy.
Absolutely.
Or finally scheduling that doctor's appointment you've been putting off. Or even just taking 5 minutes to sit quietly and breathe.
The key is to start small.
Right.
Choose one thing you can do today to create a little bit more order,
Yeah.
a little bit more space for peace and clarity.
And as we've learned today, that small step can have a ripple effect.
Right.
Not just on our own well-being,
It does.
but on the well-being of those around us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that our actions, no matter how small, have the potential to make a difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of mental health, through the lens of Dr. Jordan Peterson, we encourage you to reflect on that question.
Yeah.
What is one small step you can take today?
Good question.
What tiny shift can you make to bring a bit more order to your world?
Love it.
And if you're feeling brave, share your step with us on social media.
Oh, yeah.
We'd love to hear what you're doing to create more peace and clarity in your life.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep taking care of yourselves.